Sekeres and Price for Friday, August 9th, 2024, coming to you from the Nation Network studio, built by Arbor Lee, here at the iconic Wall Center, downtown Vancouver. And happy birthday to the Wall Center. Turns 30. Big birthday party yesterday. You might have seen the fireworks, actually, if you were downtown Vancouver. We were invited to the party. I wasn't able to make it.
No.
You didn't go either, I'm guessing?
No.
Anyways, a sensational time had by all. Thank you to Sasha, Sean, the whole crew here that has welcomed us so dearly over the last 3 years of doing the show here at the Wall Center. And if you're looking for some meeting space, hey, right here, the place to be. Sales@wallcenter.com. Matt Sekeres alongside Blake Price. Jacob Lazar hitting switches, conducting things. We got a big show coming up. We normally start with our poll question, but today I want to start, Blake, with our top story, brought to you by Yellow Dog Brewing, Neighborhood Brewing, Yellow Dog Spirits and Foolish Winery. Canada gold in the men's 4x100 relay in Paris, one of the signature events of any Summer Olympic Games, and an absolutely sensational, mesmerizing race for the Canadians, and a highlight you are going to be seeing for the years and decades to come as Andre DeGrasse crosses that line first and the Canadians celebrate far and wide at the Olympic Stadium.
It was like turning back the clock to yesteryear when we expected to win medals at this event, and these guys had just gotten old, and I just thought, it's just not there anymore. Andre DeGrasse looked old, didn't make the 200 and 100 finals, and it was just, you just felt like it was over for this quartet. And he was, if the leader of the quartet isn't on his game, what are the chances that the quartet can be on its game? Well, they were on their game right from the get-go, and I know a lot of people, and I saw J-Pat commenting on this already, the Brendan Rodney, he looked like a guy I've never seen before in the third leg.
Mm-hmm. He had a good Olympics. He had run some really, especially the 200. He was just nipped at the line. But this was extraordinary. And now these four gentlemen, Jerome Blake, Brendan Rodney, Aaron Brown, and Andre DeGrasse, stand shoulder to shoulder with Donovan Bailey, Bruni Surin, Glenroy Gilbert, and Robert Esme. That Canadian, of course, that fantastic Canadian team from 96 in Atlanta. They were in the 9th lane here, the far outside lane. There was a little bit of a clunky exchange. The first exchange between Rodney and Blake was not perfect.
Not American clunky.
No, it was.
Because their exchanges were disastrous, and ultimately they're disqualified.
As Mark Lee said on the CBC call, every single American exchange was a disaster.
Yeah.
So Canada with another gold medal, and in an event that, look, people thought they could contend. I think track observers thought it'd be no surprise to see Canada on the podium with a bronze, maybe even a silver. But there are some powerhouse teams there, the USA, the Italians, who are the defending reigning Olympic champions in this sport. And it was an upset for the ages, a race for the ages, a Canadian Olympic highlight for the ages, a Canadian sporting moment.
Apparently they were last in the odds in this final.
Yep.
50-1.
Well, I mean, because of the way some of them had looked, most notably DeGrasse.
Like, I don't think anybody,
people didn't, as you say, didn't have any kind of confidence in this.
Nobody expected DeGrasse to really medal in the 100 this year. But if he had finished 5th in the 100, if he had finished 3rd in the 200, then I think you would have had a whole different flavor going into this race of, hey, we can do something here. Well, because he didn't even qualify for the fun, I think all bets were off. It was no chance.
It's a 7th Olympic medal for Andre DeGrasse. It means that he medals in 3 consecutive Olympic Games, of course. That was the one thing. His career was going out a little bit with a whimper here.
Yeah.
And then along comes this relay race and a final opportunity. And look, he's only 29, but, this is a young man's game, sprinting. So you're sitting there thinking, okay, well, his Olympic career is going to go out with a little bit of a whimper. That's really sad for a athlete who has brought so much glory to the country. And of course, had those incredibly charming moments with Usain Bolt, the world's fastest man, still the world's fastest man in previous Olympic Games, the defending reigning gold medalist in the 200 from Tokyo. There's a couple of silver medals and 3 bronze medals on his resume. And now he adds one in Paris. So it's 2 golds, 2 silvers, 3 bronze for Andre DeGrasse.
Ties Penny Alexiak for the most decorated.
And that's saying something because the number of events that swimmers get to swim.
Right.
Not to mention how glorious Penny was in her Olympic debut. So an extraordinary achievement here. A gobsmacking race to see Canada out in front. And, DeGrasse running the anchor leg there, Blake. He's known as a closer, albeit that was hardly the case in the 100. He had a great start and couldn't close, which I think also fueled some of the pessimism around him and this team. And so you're sitting there watching and going, oh, are they going to track Andre down? They were not able to track Andre down. And how about this? Our friend Ben Steiner, who we'll have on the program later, and full disclosure, we recorded the interview with Ben before this race. At the World Relays in the spring, a reporter asked the USA's Noah Lyles, who did not run this race for the Americans because he tested positive for COVID. And someone is going to have to explain to me how a guy who tested positive for COVID was able to
still run the
and compete. Like, I thought, could you not infect the other athletes? Was that not some? Anyways, a reporter asked Lyles if he saw Canada as a 4x100 threat in Paris. Lyles' response, Who? And then he started laughing. Well, who's laughing now, Noah?
Yeah.
What's Yellow Dog up to this weekend?
Well, they'd like to tell you about the Lake Monster West Coast IPA. They've released the legend. It's got something lurking beneath the surface. It's light and crispy, yet loaded with Strata and Citra hops on tap, ready to go in the tasting room and available in select locations across BC. The Lake Monster West Coast IPA.
I'll be trying it next week up in Penticton.
Enjoy.
Hit up Neighborhood, hit up Yellow Dog. Looking forward to it. Okay, poll question before we get to the Vancouver Canucks. And we'll hear from Vincent Desharnais here in a second. Do you want Vancouver to host another Olympics? Yes or no? You can vote. Sekeres and Price on X or YouTube. Blake, what says you?
Yeah. I think the answer is yeah. This is a rare chance to do it even better. Learn from the mistakes, and yet use a lot of the infrastructure that's already here. I think involving the First Nations, even though that was a failed bid this past, couple of years to make it go for 2030, I think you got a chance to pull up your socks and before the infrastructure that you built for the original games is just too old too. But I don't think we're at that point right now. I think you could bid for games and still get a lot of use out of some of these facilities. So, yeah, the answer is yes.
For several years there, I thought to myself, how could we ever top Vancouver 2010, Vancouver Whistler 2010, when, of course, Canada with that late push wins the gold rush. I mean, that games really had everything from a Canadian perspective. It had 2 gold medals in hockey. It had athletes we fell in love with, like Scott Moyer and Tessa Virtue.
Bilodeau.
Local athletes did well. Male Ricker comes to mind there. It had one of the, fun, amusing moments of the games with John Montgomery and the pitcher of beer walking through the village in Whistler. It had the love story in short track speed skating. Remember Charles Hamelin? It had even a curling gold, at least on the men's side of things. Not to mention heartbreak and emotion that we poured out for athletes like Jeannie Richette. And yet now 14 years later, I am in the category of absolutely I'd love to see Vancouver host another Olympics. Can't remember a better 2 weeks in the city. Can't remember when the spirit was as high, when the sense of community was as strong, when the patriotism, which often lacks in this country, was so palpable. Not to mention the fact, Blake, that, you know, a lot of the venues, as you say, are still here. So it's a little bit more turnkey than it was in 2010. But also, there are necessary public infrastructure projects. And rightfully or wrongfully, governments do tend to see value in the Olympics, and that tends to be a catalyst for investment in some of these public infrastructure projects. And just two notably, I mean, there's still a huge housing shortage here in British Columbia, across Canada, but most acutely here in Vancouver. And absolutely got to get a train out to UBC.
The funny thing,
that enormous student body, you know, and getting to and from one of the jewels of our community, the campus at UBC, Point Grey, we got to get train service out there. So, yeah, I am wholeheartedly in the yes camp for Vancouver hosting another game.
The funny thing is we've talked about hosting 2 games per city, sort of to make use of all this. They did used to do this too. St. Moritz, 28 and 48, just 20 years separating, which would be the equivalent of if we were hosting in 2030. Innsbruck in 64 and 76, only 12 years apart. And they go back to back. Of course, Beijing went summer, winter, back to back.
Well, not back to back.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In succession.
Yeah.
To some degree. And Salt Lake City's only going to be separated by 32 years. I mean, at that point, once you're 30 years separated, I mean, that's a whole generation of people that weren't taking part, that weren't enjoying it.
Right.
So it doesn't even feel like a repeat at that point.
No. And just before I'm on airs and emissions, Marianne St. Gelais with Charles Hamlin, the romance story there. But I mean, that game's had legacy athletes. Claire Hughes won her medal. Christina Groves. They were older athletes at that point, but they got to step the podium in Canada.
Who is our Fort St. John long tracker?
Denny McCarthy. Morrison. Denny Morrison.
Denny Morrison, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
My mind on golf there for a second. He won gold with the men's team pursuit and speed skating. So, yeah, I mean, JCJ Anderson won the gold in snowboarding, you may remember. So, I mean, there were a lot of highlights there. Humphreys and Moyes in the bobsleigh, Ashley McIver in the freestyle skiing, right? So there were a lot of highlights from those games. And you're quite right, Blake. Like, future generations are going to hear their, you know, parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles talk about Vancouver 2010 for a long, long time. Yeah, they deserve to experience it for themselves. So wholeheartedly, yes.
Like the soonest, and let's face it, they're not going to get it right after Salt Lake. So the soonest this can happen is going to be 42. So that's 32 years separation, which is the same as Salt Lake separation. But, you know, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about 2042. Although I say that it's unlikely to happen that it'd go Salt Lake City to Canada. It's going from Milan to Nice. I mean, that's not very far.
Same neck of the woods, really.
Yeah. So if they can go Milan to Nice, certainly they can go Salt Lake City to Vancouver.
Unquestionably.
Yeah.
As mentioned, Jacob Lazar is hitting switches and conducting things here today. And Jacob's been working with us here in the Nation Network for several months now. And I got to say, I am so mightily impressed with the breadth of sports knowledge and interest that Jacob has. I'm not sure there is a sport we have brought up here, Blake, where Jacob hasn't had some sort of take. What do you think? How old were you at 2010? You're a Vancouver guy through and through, right?
Yes, I am. And it was 13 years old in 2010. So kind of at the perfect age to really take those games in, you know, had a little bit of autonomy, able to, you know, kind of go out. We spent one day walking around downtown.
By yourself?
Wow.
Did mom and dad let you take the SkyTrain into downtown by yourself?
With some friends, but yes. And then, you know, family gatherings, watching the hockey game. So it was kind of the perfect age to really take that in. And if we're talking about the 2040s now, yeah, that's something I can share with my kids probably around a similar age. So
yeah, awesome. Did you get to any events or just downtown for the Spirit?
I saw some short track speed skating at the Coliseum, which actually was a ton of fun.
Oh, short track's fun. That's an amazing sport to watch live. It really is.
And in my favorite venue in the city as well. So,
oh, really?
Oh, I love the Coliseum. Always have, and being able to watch. Yeah, like knew very little about short track, but so much fun live.
Yeah,
the Rats love Pacific Coliseum too. Yeah. Are you part rodent, Jacob?
No comment.
I have to go there. Why do you have to go there? And Jacob, just between the ages of 10 and 13, that qualifies as the golden era of sports. Doesn't matter what years, it's between your 10 and 13th birthdays, because nothing is more important than sports when you're 10 to 13, right? You don't have like real life grown up worries yet. Your biggest responsibility is homework and maybe some chores around the house. So,
and jadedness hasn't quite
absolutely. There's no cynical, there's no jaded, anything like that. Between your 10th and 13th birthdays, that's ideally when you want your team to win a championship or your country to win gold medals, as the case may be. All right, let's move on to the Vancouver Canucks here for a second, because we have done some talking around the free agent signings over the course of the summer. But I want to drill down here a little bit further on defenseman Vincent Desharnais. In a second, we're going to hear from Desharnais. He joined the Jason Gregor show on Sports 1440 in Edmonton this week. He actually gave Gregor 45 minutes of his time. Now, I've been on Gregor's show before, and it's usually a longer hit. It's 20 minutes or so.
Gregor can talk too. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Talk show. Hope so. But he did like 45 minutes with Gregor. I hope Gregor was paying him at that point. That's like regular guest territory. So we're going to hear from him here in a moment. And hey, the big fella seems like he has a big heart as well, because there was a lot of talk in this interview about the charity work he's going to do. Not to mention auctioning off different items for Oilers fans there in Edmonton. So he's still supporting charities there in Edmonton, as well as in his native province of Quebec.
And he said he wanted to stay there.
Yeah,
but
he did. He
ultimately,
did. Well, and more on
how it
that
happens
here in a second. In fact, he talked about how he went to Connor McDavid's wedding, which I guess you're allowed to say you went to Connor McDavid's wedding. You're just not allowed to give any details of Connor McDavid's.
Yeah, proof.
Exactly.
Yes.
No show cause, no show proof. He talked about how that was sort of the last hurrah for him with his Oilers teammates. He talked about how he and Darnell Nurse have already started chirping each other and talking about, what happens next season when the Canucks and Oilers play and they find themselves in the same corner. And Vincent was quick with I'll be ready. And
it'll be in the Canucks corner. God help me if Darnell.
He also had a very good line. He said, it won't be me in Darnell's corner.
No,
it's going to be Darnell in my corner. We know who's the more defensive-minded defenseman there, and who's sometimes willing to move on up ice and get a little caught out of position. He also talked about all the love that Oilers fans showed him, that he put a farewell post together. He was sort of half expecting, that dark side of social media to come out and people criticizing him for joining a division rival. And he said 600 some comments, and they were all positive, and that he went through them all too. Right. I think so. I think we're looking, if the guy can perform, I think we're looking at somebody who could become a fan favorite here in Vancouver, because he's endearing in a Alex Burrows kind of way. Not necessarily the, massive underdog story of a guy who played ball hockey and AHL free agent, worked his way up to the top line with the Sedins, but a late bloomer, right? A bit of an underdog in that regard, despite the massive frame. And my question to you, Blake, is there's an opinion afoot, and Rick Tocchet articulated it here recently and did so back in July as well, that because Desharnais has played so few National Hockey League games, and it's like 140 some when you add the playoffs in, because the big defenseman, the jumbo outsized defenseman, takes a little, defensemen take longer to mature to begin with in the NHL. I mean, there's a school of thought you need 300-400 games as a defenseman to really, understand everything. And the jumbo defenseman taking even longer. And take a look at Zdeno Chara's career arc and when he became a dominant player and understood how to use all that size and positioning and stick work and all that. Tocchet said he likes his feet. I know you were critical of Desharnais in the playoffs. I know he came out of the lineup for Edmonton in the playoffs. But what's your sense about the Canucks maybe catching lightning in a bottle here and getting a guy at precisely the right time where his NHL career is potentially going to hit a next level, take the next step?
Well, the fact that the Canucks were so vocal and adamant that this was a guy worth investing in and that had more to give, they've put themselves on the line here a little bit because if Desharnais starts serving up pizzas and looks slow and looks way out of his element, well, they're going to wear that. But the fact they were willing to say it leads me to believe they believe it at the very least. But I'm going to have to see it. I'm going to, you talked about the personality. Personality is great. Love that. That's a step in the right direction. But what ultimately brought popularity to a guy like Alex Burrows, even before he scored 30 plus goals, was there was a separating skill, and his aggression and his speed is what sort of brought, like, people thought he was a 15-goal guy when he first arrived. They're like, oh, this guy's got this reckless abandon skating, and he's hard on the forecheck. If you get 15 goals out of this guy, great. He's really fun to watch. So you were fine with Burrows at that because you could see why he was going to make himself an everyday National Hockey League player. Beyond wingspan, what's that separating skill for Vincent Desharnais? Because there's been a lot of guys, there's been a lot of oversized defensemen in the National Hockey League that have not translated. Is he that guy, or is he part of the new generation of oversized defensemen that is making it work in the NHL? It's going to be up to him.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you, but not many at this level, right? At this size, 6'7". And 200, whatever he's going to check in at.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I think there's a case to be made that the Vancouver Canucks have 5 third-pair defensemen.
Yes.
Soucy, Myers, Desharnais, Forbort, and Juleson.
Yeah.
I think there's also a case that could be made that the Vancouver Canucks may not have the league's best second pair, but are going to have a playoff style second pair if Desharnais is able to leapfrog Myers this year and skate alongside Carson Soucy, who, let's remember, had a multitude of injuries last year. Or if somehow Myers can still maintain coming on age 35 here.
It's why it's
Desharnais at 28 that I think still has some upside there amongst the group of defensemen that they have brought in.
We've seen the playoffs has become physical again. We've seen that the playoffs has become, about the big defenseman, which is why I think if they get there, it might be a little bit better. But I'm surprised that they didn't go out and get a cheap Oliver Shillington or a Tyson Barrie or something like that helps you get there. You're the kind of guy that might give you 55 games in the regular season and not play a single minute come playoff time.
Yeah. I think it's clear that Foote and Tocchet just that's not their jam, bro. They don't want that style of defenseman, or at least they've got one of them in Quinn Hughes, and that's the limit for them. They want the forest surrounding the little guys.
And we'll see if that's the right approach. We'll see if that works.
Yeah.
It's
because you are right about getting through the 82 games being the first step here before you get to the playoffs.
Right.
It's great to build a playoff style defense, but if it doesn't hold up over 82 and you don't get there, then it's all for naught.
Unless they are still really head over heels with Akito Hirose.
I don't think anybody in the new coaching staff was ever head over heels on Akito Hirose. I think the market was. I think the previous coaching staff might have been, but I don't believe Tocchet and Foote have been those guys.
Yeah. So, like, there's nobody there on the farm that's like, oh, how about that guy makes it? And they've name dropped Cole McWard a little bit, but he's still not an electric defenseman by any stretch.
No. Okay. We've done enough talking. Let's hear from the big fella himself. Here's Vincent Desharnais, courtesy of the Jason Gregor Show and Sports 1440 in Edmonton. And those of you watching the program will see the video here as well. We knew about the conversation he had with Rick Tocchet and Adam Foote on July 1st, and he details a second conversation that has taken place here with the coaching staff as well.
Desharnais from the Canucks, I guess first time as a Canuck, joins the show. Big V, how you doing, my man?
I'm doing great. How are you?
All right, guys, I have to fix that video. Bit of an issue with the export.
Okay,
so we'll get to it in a couple minutes.
We'll get to it here in a second. In the interim, Dom Lucian of The Athletic, who I know underrated Quinn Hughes last year. Everybody knows that. Even Dom knows that now. He puts together a fan confidence survey on NHL front offices every summer. Needless to say, the Canucks have not scored well here in the past. The Jim Benning era, they were routinely amongst the lowest finishers on this list. And even last year, they finished 30th on this list.
Really?
Out of 32 teams. They did. Yeah. Well, you'll remember you had the extremely clunky, heartless firing of Bruce Boudreau. It was a dreadful season for the Vancouver Canucks.
This is 2 years previous, remember, folks.
Right.
Yeah.
The Ilya Mikheyev, their big free agent signing, got hurt and missed a big chunk of the season, didn't have much of an impact on the team. They had signed JT Miller to a massive contract, and people looked at it and went, I'm not sure that's going to age well, and may still be the case, but Miller certainly redeemed it this year. And there was, still a thought that these guys were managing to the whims of ownership, which was, we've got to do everything we can to win now and make the playoffs now. No patience, no vision. Let's just cobble together what we can, trot it out there, and hope it's good enough, and that the market responds in kind, particularly with their wallets. Well, the team building that Jim Rutherford and Patrick Alvin have done here, the pieces they added, the sensible contracts they signed a year ago, July, seemingly has revolutionized the confidence that Canucks fans have in their managers. Blake, they finished 5th on this survey, behind only the Cup champion Florida Panthers, Jim Nill and the Dallas Stars, and just look up and down that roster this past year. I still think Dallas was the best roster top to bottom this past year. Tampa, which is still, of course, dining out off their back-to-back Stanley Cups, and Julian Brisebois. Somehow the Utah Hockey Club finished in the top 5 here, although I think that might just be the enthusiasm of the new fans there in Utah wanting to vote their management group up. Although, it looks like they've drafted very well. Bill Armstrong, even in the Coyotes days, and it looks like they've got cap space. So I think you're looking at something there that is in ascension. So those were the top 4 teams, and then the Vancouver Canucks at 5th. You think it's merited?
Yeah.
You understand the jump of 25 spots up these rankings?
Yeah, as you outlined it, I mean, really the lack of confidence was not about the hockey moves. It was more about the emotional part of it rather than the brass tacks of actually what they were doing on the ice to that point. I think people are a little bit more understanding of the plan. This does not seem like an administration that goes by the no plan. They seem to have an idea of what they want. Now, again, doesn't mean it's right. Only one team gets to hoist the cup at the end of every year. So there's a lot of smart hockey men besides the cup winning team, hockey men and women these days. So you you don't always get rewarded with the cup for really smart hockey moves. But I think people see logical, smart-ish hockey moves made by this administration.
And for a second summer in a row, I think you could argue.
Yeah, and it's in, again, they also do have the benefit of the greatest juxtaposition. Because if you had a merely average management group before this, maybe some of their average moves, this administration's average moves,
you look great,
look like Mensa level.
Oh, absolutely.
And you wouldn't have got that if they were just coming off of a meh group.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. Okay, I'm totally had the Desharnais clip ready to go. So we mentioned the conversation with the coaching staff on July 1st, which really convinced him to sign here in Vancouver. And now a more recent conversation with Tocchet. Take a listen.
Sign in Vancouver. Did you have a conversation with Rick Tocchet? Like I hear Rick Tocchet, guys love playing for him. He's very intense. Like he's a coach who how he played the game was tough and rugged, and it would seem like, oh, this guy would really appreciate how Vincent Desharnais plays the game.
Yeah, the GM and Talk and Adam Foote, they called me before I signed. So when they made me an offer on July 1st, they wanted to talk to me as well. So I had a great conversation then. And then last week we had another great conversation. And like you said, I don't know him that well yet, but just from talking to him 20, 30 minutes, both times, I just seems like a easy guy to talk to. And he seems like a fair guy where he's intense. He's gonna ask for a lot. He's gonna demand for a lot. But if you give it to him, he's rewarding. He's gonna reward you for doing what he asked for. And working with Adam Foote, I'm very excited. I've heard nothing but positive comments about him, positive things of how detailed he is as a D coach and how he uses video quite a bit for players, for D-men to get better. So. I think the coaching staff was a great fit for me, and being able to talk to them beforehand really made it easier for me to pick the Canucks. It's going to be and actually a thing I was thinking about too, like when I signed, is the whole season, every time we would play Vancouver, the guys, not Vancouver again. Like they're so intense, they're so like hard to play against. They're always in your face, and in playoffs we saw it. It was probably the team that gave us the most challenge, the biggest challenge of the first three series. So I mean, for me to go play for a team like that kind of matches my style of play, my mentality.
That was Vincent Desharnais with the Jason Gregor Show, Sports 1440 in Edmonton. A couple of things I want to pick up on there, Blake. And you may have heard a subtle team like that, which brought a smile to my face. And you had mentioned this as the Oilers made their way into the Western Conference Final against the Dallas Stars and then into the Stanley Cup Final against the Florida Panthers. They just kept talking about the Canucks and the Vancouver series. And so when he sits there and he talks about how much the Oilers hated playing Vancouver, how they were the team that gave them the toughest test, albeit I think the Panthers probably have the trump card there. Like to me, if I'm Rick Tocchet, if I'm Adam Foote, if I'm this group of coaches, that's just fuel, baby. Like I just keep on talking about that, Vincent. Tell your teammates about that. Let's extend that storyline. Let's make that our thing that, yeah, Edmonton won the West last year, but we finished first in the Pacific, and they absolutely hate playing us. We love playing them.
Yeah.
Fair?
Yeah. I mean, I think you have to be careful about making it sound like you're cheering on a participatory ribbon of some sort, but you do manufacture something to get your bravado
narratives,
of.
for
Yeah,
sure.
some narratives, and hey, the Canucks can't ignore the fact that they won the division last year. They can't ignore the fact that they had a 3-2 lead on that team in the second round of the playoffs. I mean, I certainly hope that the Canucks don't go into future games versus the Oilers thinking they're the inferior team. Like that can't be the narrative anymore. As much as you could maybe think and point to on paper why one team has more offensive skill than the other, I think you could also point to the rest of the roster and say how it evens out over the course of the entirety of the roster. Now, I'm not here saying that the Canucks are better than the Oilers. I don't know that they are. But I certainly don't think that there's a reason why any Vancouver Canuck should be walking into a game with the Oilers thinking we're going to lose this one unless things go perfect. I think both teams are fallible. I think both teams are good.
The other thing I want to pick up on there, the way they use video, where he talks about becoming a better player via the way they use video. And I do think that this is some of Tocchet's coaching genius and some of the and helps explain why the Canucks were able to make such a big jump. Every coaching staff will say they're detailed. Every player, when talking about a coaching staff, will say, oh, yeah, they're very detailed. It's become a euphemism in some regards. It's become a stock answer in some regards. But how slavish you are to those details, how willing you are as a coach, as a leader, to go back to these details, keep harping, and yet presenting them in fresh ways. I do think that that is part and parcel of Tocchet and this coaching staff and the success they were able to have this year, that it's the minutia within the details, if you will. I mean, I was watching something recently about the Pittsburgh Steelers dynasty in the 70s, the Steel Curtain. And one of their outside linebackers said something like, Chuck Noll, who was the head coach, came up to me and said, you know, son, if you just stand 2 feet to your left, that's going to change everything for you. Sight lines, ability to tackle the running back on the sweep, the ability to drop. And it's like, I'll be damned. Like, I moved 2 feet in my alignment, really small. And it changed my career. Like, it absolutely unlocked everything that coach mentioned to me. I do wonder whether that is something that Tocchet brings to the program and brings to the bench that is somewhat of an advantage for the Vancouver Canucks in comparison to other coaches who may think they're detailed, but aren't willing to get into the weeds like Tocchet is in these video sessions and on the practice sheet.
I think players can sometimes gloss over when it comes to team video.
Oh, for sure.
But when it comes to individual video, you perk up.
Oh, hell yeah.
And and this goes right down to junior sports as well, because it doesn't happen enough at junior sports, but I can remember the first time I watched myself ski racing and going, oh, really? That's what I'm doing? Like, there's this aha moment where you watch yourself and because in your own mind, God, you're doing it so perfectly. And then you see yourself and you're thinking, oh, yeah, that is not quite as perfect as I thought it felt like. And you're right, little tiny tweaks, and you definitely get more one. And it feels like this coaching staff is a lot more one-on-one in the places that it needs to be. I don't think they're bringing Quinn Hughes in for a lot of one-on-one. Guy doesn't need it, but the guys that do need the coaching, it feels like they're a little bit more arm over shoulder with those guys, showing them and asking them and pointing out what needs to be done. And video is just great for that because it's the proof. It's one thing for a coach saying you're not doing X, but when you've got the video proof, see this, I told you you're not doing X. There's very little that you've got in your own psyche, in your own brain to sort of counter to that. It's time to make that change, and that generally gets the change.
Well, whether it happens or not for Vincent Desharnais, the one thing we know is true is that there is a narrative out there amongst NHL players that Rick Tocchet, Adam Foote, this coaching staff could make you a better player. And I think that's worth its weight in gold for the Canucks as they continue with this program and continue to try and attract free agents, and particularly these free agents in the margins who are going to have options, right, are typically deciding between very little money one way or the other. And part of that is the salesmanship of the organization. And the head coach is a big part of the salesmanship. And I think the Vancouver Canucks have an excellent one here in Rick Tocchet. Speaking of gold, so that 4x100 gold, it is 24 medals secured now for Canada. The women's beach volleyball goes here in a little bit, and so that's another potential gold medal. You were saying you think you can get to 10 gold medals.
Well, I had Sarah Mitten down as one.
Oh, and she
did not do
shot put. Oh my god,
last place in the final, unfortunately.
Fell out of the ring. But you have Phil Wizard, Vancouver's Philip Kim, B-boy Phil Wizard, so the gold medal favorite on
beach,
Sunday.
You need break, so that's 8-9. You need to find a real Cinderella.
Well, Marco
somewhere.
Arope, the 800-meter world champion. There's a possibility there as well. So Canada all but certain to eclipse, tying right now with the Tokyo medal count of 24. We'll see if they can get over and above. Now, contextually, there are more events, there are more medals. There's a school of thought, and we'll get into this with Ben Steiner later, that it shouldn't be just matching or inching by, but there should be another flight of medals. Anyways, USA France in the men's basketball final, Blake, and a couple of things to note here. First of all, Joel Embiid, he who could have played for France, is a massive villain there. He has been booed in the arena. And I'll use Gary Bettman's line here. You have great stamina in terms of the booing that they have been able
to. A 5-second touch.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Every single time he touches it, they're booing.
Yeah.
Throughout the game. And this is a Gary Bettman level booing for Joel Embiid. There are very few people in this world who can speak to being booed as loudly, as lustily. And for in Gary's case, for 30 years. Joel Embiid, if he plays more basketball games in France, is going to be able to talk shop, talk turkey with Gary.
Although the Boston Celtics fans might be booing somebody else.
Right.
Steve Kerr is not playing Jason Tatum.
No. And this drew criticism from Charles Barkley. And as we know, Sir Charles is not shy with his opinions. Yeah. And of course, Sir Charles, also a men's Olympic basketball team member for Team USA, the Dream Team, won gold. And frankly, I agree with Barkley here. First of all, we've talked about how this is not the Dream Team. The rest of the world is better, and this team is not as good as the Dream Team. So you have that. But still, the gap was so massive. And Blake, as someone who covered international basketball 15 years ago or so, the two best teams in the world outside the U.S., unquestionably, were Argentina and Spain. Spain, for whatever reason, maybe it was the Gasol brothers, maybe it was Rubio running a pretty decent point because he was a pretty creative and good floor general back then. They had some other guys, Rudy Fernandez and some others who were good, solid players. But Spain gave them games, and Argentina, that had more NBA players, would get routinely spanked by the U.S., so they really had kind of one peer, but I wouldn't even consider Spain a peer back in that era. And of course, that was Kobe, LeBron, Dwight Howard, Darren Williams, like a good team, like really, really good team. Not Dream Team level, but very, very good team. This team kind of gets tested and has peers.
Yeah.
Like Serbia should have beat them. Serbia had a huge lead going into the fourth quarter. And you have to think that one Serbian player is kicking himself for taunting the U.S. and the Carmelo Anthony celebration. Like, in what fucking world, son, is that going to help your team?
No.
Just mind-boggling that you would go there. Like, brag when it's over. You beat the U.S. in the semifinal of the Olympic men's basketball tournament. Take to Twitter, go to all your socials, and absolutely drop the mic, brag, taunt, do what you want.
That was Derek Martin of the Grizzlies.
Yeah, that was getting into Michael Jordan's kitchen, trying to.
Yeah.
So I agree with Barkley that they've been tested is a little bit of an indictment, and that Steve Kerr has a limited NBA style rotation where
you don't need it.
Newly crowned NBA champion Jason Tatum of the Boston Celtics is not getting on the floor, or at least not to the degree you would expect. And Barkley said, look, if you put Tatum on a floor in the NBA, He's better than 99% of the players. This is international basketball. He's better than everybody on the other teams.
It doesn't make
and
any
Barkley's
sense.
point is just roll your guys. You use the word treadmill. Just keep them on a treadmill.
Well, and that's the thing.
Someone gets a little tired on the treadmill, you take him out, you put the next guy in.
You could make the argument. You could make the argument no NBA coach ever uses all 12 players on the roster in a game. Like, it just doesn't happen. But of course, this is not your regular NBA roster.
No, and to me, Steve Kerr is a smart enough guy to know the difference and adapt and adjust.
But also, if you're using 11, can't you use 12? Like he's honestly, the only guy.
Honestly,
he is literally the only guy that can't seem to curry any favor with Steve Kerr, and that is also weird. Like if there was two of them on the end of the bench that just weren't getting in, to me, I could understand that more than this, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, Barkley's right in that your great advantage is depth. It's not just the quality of your starting five. It's the quality of your next five and the quantity you have beyond that starting five.
One fewer fouls to give to is
right.
It's nicer to have,
and in terms of France, like Wembanyama is a unicorn. He can affect the game in so many ways, particularly on the defensive side. Now, as a young player, he's not what he's going to be, but he can absolutely hang with any of the American players. Fournier and Batum are veteran NBA players who know how to play, know their roles. And then, of course, we saw a couple of the other role players, the power forwards, Yabusele and who's the other one?
Cordinier?
Yes, Cordinier, who had awesome games against Canada in the quarter. So, France has some guys who can compete. I would be gobsmacked if they won. But I also wonder, is there any kind of dissension going on there? Was the first three quarters against Serbia a canary in the mine shaft? And there's a terrific documentary about Coach Krzyzewski and shepherding that 2008 gold medal team, that coming off the loss in Athens in the semi, where there's stunning, right? U.S. lost to Puerto Rico at an Olympic Games. But, go watch that documentary and understand how Mike Krzyzewski knew what he was getting into in terms of the egos and the buy-in of global superstars who have to come together and form a team. The Kobe camp and the LeBron camp and everything he had to do to bring those guys as close together as he could, knowing full well they were never going to be bosom buddies. So I'm a little bit interested in this men's basketball final, and I didn't expect to be unless it was Canada, USA.
Let me ask you this, and we've talked about this within the scope of Canada getting all their players back, given there was only downside for them here because they just get the infamy of not getting a medal. Now it's a home Olympics. I think it'll be easy to get them, but is there ultimately long range, Matt? Is there a risk? Because I don't see other countries getting to the Canadian level of NBA saturation. Is there a risk going forward in non-LA games of NBA players going, there's only downside now? We got a legit chance to lose now. Why am I signing up for this?
Yeah, I don't think so. I still think winning the Olympic gold medal is one of the great prizes in global sport, and I think a lot of those NBA players are going to still want that in their trophy case. It is sort of a measure that you're the best of the best, because that is the most difficult rep team in the world to make. I mean, it stands with the New Zealand All Blacks, the Canadian men's Olympic hockey team. It is, that is just to be on the team is an acknowledgement that you're one of the greats, not just of the day, but, how many guys have played on the U.S. Olympic team who aren't in the Hall of Fame?
To me, the race is going to be, can the World Cup of basketball become what it wants to become? Because if that's the case, then I think the Olympic tournament, right, much like the Olympic soccer tournament, the Olympic tennis tournament, because all these federations,
some of the alpine skiers will tell you that the Olympics isn't as big a deal as
not as deep fields, right? So they get deeper fields at their own world championships. Every sport wants what soccer has. Every sports federation wants what soccer has. a more important thing outside of the Olympics that they own, govern, and guide more hands-on. So, but nobody else has been able to do it outside of soccer. So we'll see.
Yeah, I should also mention that men's 4x100 relay team. That's another British Columbia gold medalist. That is, and we've had a number of British Columbia gold medalists on some of the teams that have won or medaled there in Paris. But Jerome Blake, born in Jamaica, Kelowna guy, resides in Vancouver. Congratulations. Second Olympic Games. Congratulations. What an amazing, amazing way for Canada to close out almost these Paris Olympics. Let's get to today's
Penny's reached out, by the way, to Andre Degas saying, welcome to the club.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Well done on Penny. How many have more?
Nobody in Canada.
Claire doesn't have more?
Claire's got 6, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Klassen doesn't have more?
Don't think so, no.
Summers, I mean, they're caretaking that record for Summer, I think, though.
Yes, particularly. Yes.
17-year-old going, 4 medals this time and going to another? At least one more, for sure. Greta, our menu. Great spot to catch the game throughout the season. Quick walk to the rink stadium. Go-to spot for food, drink, and fun before and after the game. Blake, I did something yesterday that I haven't done in maybe 35 years.
Oh.
We were sailing back from Victoria. I noticed there was an arcade on the boat. I also noticed the arcade was empty. At that point, I'd been squiring around 7 members of my family for 14 hours, and I was done with that. I dropped a loonie into the Donkey Kong machine, and I played Donkey Kong for the better part of 30
When did
minutes.
you do this?
Last night.
Really?
15 hours ago. And Blake still got it.
Yeah.
Well, I made it to level 3 on 4 plays, which is pretty good.
And is that good? Does that consider good?
12 lives, 4 plays. Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I mean, it was great to be Mario again. Swing the hammer, climb the ladders, jump the fireballs, the barrels, rescue the princess. Yeah, I was, and of course, the other thing you got to remember or figure out, how do I win this level again? Or how do I advance? And here's the other thing, Blake. And look, no King of Kong here. There was a crowd forming behind me. Some young kids
to watch you,
a mother and her child. They were sort of semicircling, kind of like you'll see in the breakdance competition on Sunday. What's it called? The Cypher. I felt the pressure of eyeballs behind me as I was making my way through the Donkey Kong levels. Arcade at Greta. I think we got a date coming up here. I was too busy during the playoffs as we were having our watch parties, running around, giving prizes, making announcements, watching the games, eating. But Greta, we got a date. Donkey Kong. And they're bitching arcade there. 50 West Cordova or at GretaBar.com. We'll talk to J-Pat here on Vancouver Canucks. We'll ask him the question about Vancouver and the Olympics. Does he want to see it back? And then Vancouver's Ben Steiner covering the Olympics for the CBC on the historic moments here, on the hope for the weekend, what's left here, and on our city going forward as a potential Olympic host yet again. You were still astonished by this Donkey Kong story, I can tell.
I just can't believe that you were moved. First of all, I can't believe you had a quarter, because
I had a loonie on me. It's the damnedest thing. I was like, arcade, and it's empty. And I dug in my pocket, and I was like, wow, a loonie. I wonder if it takes loonies.
For some reason, I've had cash on me lately.
It is loonies.
The worst. I just freaking hate it.
It took loonies. Well, that's the other thing. I wanted to empty the, I was carrying
the
around
weight.
Change all day
The
for
sheer
some
weight.
reason. Yeah. I was like, why is there change? So I dropped the loony, and that got me 12 lives, 4 plays, whatever.
12 lives.
Yeah. And of course, you spoil a couple because you haven't played the game in 30 plus years. And so you jump into a barrel and you're dead, or, You climb a ladder as the barrel is coming down.
It would take me a long time to refamiliarize myself, I think.
Or you get to the top level and you're so astonished to be there. You go, what do I do now? And you're a little slow to climb the ladder and rescue the princess. Time now for Bet365 Bets of the Day. The segment brought to you by Bet365, proud sponsor of Sekeres and Price. I know Trey Ford and the Elks put up some points last week against Saskatchewan. I do wonder how much of that was not having a lot of this year tape on Trey Ford with the Edmonton Elks. I'm not necessarily sure they can do that against the BC Lions defense, especially with the Leo smarting from that pounding they took in Winnipeg. Like, I think you're going to have a motivated group of BC Lions Sunday in the Alberta Capital. Should also mention, I mean, that defense held Winnipeg to 13 points in the first half. Like that, they were absolutely in the ball game. It was 26 points. It was good enough to win a game. If you score it all, they didn't score. So BC's coming off the shutout, being shut out with the backup quarterback and an Edmonton team that scored points. Yeah, but this is a different defense and a motivated group. I don't often bet football unders because it's, you're rooting for
points,
futility often. Oh, great, he dropped that ball. Oh, great, that's a great punt. That's going to affect field. But I'm going under 49.5 for the Lions and Elks on Sunday.
Hate to say it, that's not a bad shout. 30-20 doesn't seem likely with these two quarterbacks. I'm going to try to go with the Eastern dominance over the West of late. Calgary into Toronto. It's almost a pick 'em. I only have to give up 1.5 on the Argonauts.
Wow.
And
Arbuckle for Toronto, I believe.
Still, I think, yes. Mm-hmm. But I'll take it. Argos minus 1.5.
Yeah. There's a fair bit of parity in the CFL. Like we were talking earlier in the year that, wow, if Montreal and BC keep going, this could be a clash of the Titans. But you're starting to see parity set in now here through the ranks. When a winless Edmonton team beats Saskatchewan, open an account with Bet365 today. Bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code VANBONUS when opening that account. Jeff Paterson coming up next.
The Vancouver Canadians are back at the Nat. Catch fireworks, giveaways, and Friday nooners all spring and summer long. Get your tickets at CanadiansBaseball.com.
Joined now by our Canucks reporter, Jeff Paterson, host of RinkWide Vancouver, and, of course, columnist with Canucks Army, where this week, Jeff, you wrote on 5 Canucks entering make-or-break territory. For those who missed it, give us the skinny.
Well, I think people can probably figure out that Vasily Podkolzin's at the top of the list. A lot of talk this offseason about the youngster, although he's not that young anymore, at 23 now, 5 years removed from that 2019 draft class of his. And we know that he had that rookie season, 14 goals and 26 points, and played, I think, 78 or 79 games. And it looked like that was going to be the jumping on point to a long and productive career. And since then, it really has been a case of a young guy going in reverse, and bunch of coaches at both the NHL and the American Hockey League level. And I kind of feel that it is now crunch time. We know that there's no safety net for the organization. They can't send him down to Abbotsford without clearing waivers. And I think Vasily Podkolzin is the type of player that a lot of those bottom feeders around the National Hockey League would be wise to take a crack at. Like, that's kind of what waivers is for, a guy that hasn't been able to hit in an organization, and the mechanisms are in place for him to get a second chance somewhere else. I don't think he's thinking about second chances at this point. He wants to make it happen here in Vancouver. But if he is put on waivers at 23-year-old, with the physical tools that he's got, I have to think that a San Jose or an Anaheim or Columbus or whoever has waiver priority would put in a claim. So I don't think he's getting through. And that makes for a fascinating sort of subplot to training camp, that there's a glut of wingers here with what the Canucks have done in the offseason, and it's on him now to step up and show up. If you remember last year in Victoria, he got an opportunity on the first couple of days of training camp to play with JT Miller and Brock Besser. He couldn't ask for a better spot. I don't know if he's going to get that opportunity this time around. They've got new faces that are going to feature in this lineup that I'm sure they want to slot in and see what they've got. And so really going to be interesting to see where it goes from here. But this is a player that played 16 games last year, had 2 assists, didn't score, got a look in the playoffs briefly, but didn't do a whole lot with that opportunity either. And so he just looks like a guy that's in his own head, afraid to make mistakes. He has to find a way to get past that. And if he's going to become the player that the Canucks hoped that he was going to be when they took him 10th overall, then it is go time for Vasily Podkolzin. So there's no question in my mind he's at the top of any list in terms of make it or break it candidates for the Vancouver Canucks.
Do not disagree one iota, my friend. With the signing of Sprong, and of course they have some affection for Sherwood, right? They specifically targeted him after that series against the Nashville Predators. Where do you think Vasily fits in this lineup? And if he doesn't, Jeff, then what would be your confidence level that he can be what we hope he becomes by beginning the season as a 13th forward?
I think my expectations have dropped now to the point that if he's going to make this team, it's probably going to be as the 12th or 13th forward. And could I see a world in which the Canucks had a fourth line with Vasily Podkolzin and Kiefer Sherwood, Teddy Bluger in the middle? That could be a line that was difficult to play against. Two guys that get in and bang and crash, and Teddy Bluger, defensively responsible, isn't going to hurt you. So that to me kind of feels like best case right now for Vasily is making this team as a fourth line guy. I think he's in a real battle, and the next two guys on my list of make it or break it were Phil DiGiuseppe and Nils Aman. And I do think that those three guys are all sort of battling to be the extra forward on the Vancouver Canucks, because when you just look at the newcomers that they've brought in, those guys are going to get an everyday opportunity. There's no doubt about that. So now it's about slotting others. I suppose Nils Höglander and ultimately where he falls in the equation may impact some of these guys that are a little further down the depth chart. But Phil DiGiuseppe is what he is. Rick Tocchet appreciates sort of that veteran quality, a guy that shows up and gives you what he can. But we all said at this time last year, if he makes this team and is in the top six, good for him, not great for the hockey club. And of course, that's exactly what happened. Didn't last long. And so DiGiuseppe brings some penalty killing utility. But let's be honest, at this stage, there isn't a whole lot more than that. And then Nils Aman is a guy that just way too quiet on way too many nights. He's got the size. Maybe he gets a leg up because he's got the versatility of being a center, but boy, it's been a struggle for him in the faceoff circle, and that's a tough way to make a living in the National Hockey League, playing that position. If I think he was in the 30 percentile on faceoffs the first year, bumped it up last year, but is a career 40-something faceoff guy, and that's an area that he would have to get a whole lot better. So I think Podkolzin, DiGiuseppe, Aman are all considered bubble guys as we sit here a month out from training camp.
Yeah. I've literally never watched Nils Aman play and go, nice play. Not once. No, it has never happened where I've.
Do you not remember that marvelous performance in Young Stars when we were there in the neighborhood section down there in the corner? You, me, and Jeff, and we went, "Wow, this Swedish free agent. He looks the part of an NHL." You see that back check? No, you don't remember that? No, maybe there were too many neighborhoods. I think that's what we're getting in. Hey, Jeff, just before we leave this, you put Arthur Shilovs on this list. Explain, good sir.
Yeah, now I qualified it, and I want to be careful here that I qualify it again. It's not make it or break it for his NHL career. He's a 23-year-old who's done everything the Canucks have asked of him to this point. But goaltending is such a fickle position. It's a numbers game always. It looks like he has the backup job to Thatcher Demko. But this is a guy that's only ever played 9 regular. He's played more playoff games. He's got more playoff starts on his resume than he does regular season games. So he has to go and prove that he can hold his own. And we've talked about the workload and the job share and all that kind of stuff. And are we looking at 27 to 30 starts for Arthur Shilovs? Guys, the Canucks are in a win now mode. If the backup can't hold up his end of the bargain, there was already talk this offseason about would the Canucks go into the market and try to find a replacement for Casey DeSmith, another veteran guy that has NHL games on his resume that could sort of hold down the fort in the event that Demko either is injured or just with the workload that you expect from the backup goaltender. And so why I've got Shilovs on this list here is you never know when these opportunities come along again. And if the Canucks were forced to go out into the market and bring in a backup, Shilovs can play in Abbotsford. He can continue to develop, but it looks like his time to be a full-time National Hockey Leaguer and leave the minors behind is now. And so in the here and now, I kind of feel like, what's he going to do with this opportunity? Is he up to the challenge? Again, he has answered every question the Canucks have put in front of him, including 10 playoff starts and a Game 7 against the Edmonton Oilers in the second round. He's been terrific for a 6th-round pick in that 2019 draft. He's come a long way in a relatively short period of time, but we've also seen guys that don't make the most of an opportunity kind of have to go to the back of the line, and then does that opportunity present itself again? So it's a slightly different scenario for Silovs, but is he going to be up to the challenge here and be able to hold down the fort in those 20 to 25 or 30 starts that you would expect from the backup this season as the Canucks control Thatcher Demko's workload?
Back to Podkolzin, wanted to ask you, with that rookie season, what do you remember of what he did right that allowed him to produce like that? And was it just because they were a shitty team and it wasn't a whole lot of rules and different coaching? No, that was still the Travis Green era, if I'm not mistaken. So there's more rules in the Bruce Boudreau era, that's for sure, in terms of what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing. But why was he able to do that? And is it just user error? Is it on the player that he hasn't been able to replicate that?
Yeah, my recollection from that season was because they just had such a lack of quality at the wing position. By default, he got opportunities way higher than Lanham. He played a lot with JT Miller that year. I remember him scoring from distance, and we all marveled at this big-time wrist shot that he had. Not slap shot or snap shot, but this was a guy that would corral the puck, pick his spots, and I can picture a couple of his goals right now as I'm talking about them, where we were like, wow, this is a big league wrist shot at the very least, if there isn't more to his game. Now, I remember in his draft year, all the talk was, he's not going to blow you away with flash and a ton of offense, but this is a well-rounded guy that is going to develop into a player that can play in all situations, is going to be out there late in games, protecting leads, has some more playmaking ability than perhaps he was given credit for in the run-up to his draft. And it just kind of feels like it's been a confidence thing with him, that he gets in his own head. And now it feels like the offensive switch has just been completely shut off. Like in those games that he got last year, I don't recall him looking dangerous. It wasn't a case of, he just didn't convert the chances he had. I just don't remember him getting many chances. Now, he was physical, and he does have to, that's got to be who he is. That's in his DNA. He's got a pro-sized body, but there's got to be more. There has to be more there for him to be an every night National Hockey Leaguer. So I think they've worked with him. We've seen the resources that this new management group has poured into player development, and he's been a part of that. It worked for Nils Höglander. So can they replicate that success? And I'm not expecting 24 goals out of Podkolzin, but they made Nils Höglander a National Hockey Leaguer by some tough love, sending him down to the minors, putting him in some spots to continue to grow his game. They basically did the same thing with Vasily Podkolzin last year. But, if you just look at his 3 pro seasons here in North America, the rookie season was terrific. There was nothing wrong with the rookie season, but it's just been steady decline since then.
I do remember him going to the net in the final quarter of the season more, but Jeff's right. The wrist shot from distance, I think, is what stood out. Jeff, the Athletics fan survey of confidence in front offices is out, and the Vancouver Canucks have come from the depths of 30th place in this ranking last year. And that was the Rutherford Alvin era, remember, right? That was the leftover, that was the remnants of the way the clunky firing of Bruce Boudreau and other things that went wrong that year. They are up to 5th behind only Florida, Dallas, Tampa, and the Utah Hockey Club, which has also come from the depths of despair. Is it merited? Do you think this is a top 5 front office in the league, or at the very least, do you understand the confidence, newfound, that Canucks Nation has in this front office?
Well, having worked in this market for as long as we all have, I was surprised, because I think skepticism comes with the territory here in Vancouver. And until they either get to a Stanley Cup final or get their hands on the Stanley Cup, I think there are some that are going to say, show me the job that these guys really have done. And Alvin himself, when he sort of pounded the table and said, we haven't done anything, even though they got pushed Edmonton to Game 7 of the second round of the playoffs. So I was surprised that they moved into the top 5, but I was also surprised that the Utah Hockey Club was in there. So I'm not really sure what to make, but those top 3, you're keeping pretty good company there with the Florida Panthers, who won the Cup. Tampa obviously has the long resume, and Jim Nill, the 2-time defending GM of the year. So Look, I think they've earned the benefit of the doubt. They had a terrific offseason a year ago with all of those short-term contracts and guys that came in and contributed to the cause, and many had career years and all of those types of things. So there was a lot of good done by this management group, and they look like they got it right with Rick Tocchet. Now, I was skeptical too. Like, I just didn't know a whole lot about Rick Tocchet as a head coach. Watched from afar when he was in Arizona, but didn't have a lot to work with and didn't have a lot of success there. I didn't know. They were certainly high on Tocchet as their guy, and it's proved to be the right call. So I can understand why they rocketed up the standings, if you will, but there is still work to be done without a doubt here. And can they replicate anything close to the summer they had a year ago? When you have a bunch of guys that have career highs, that's really tough to make happen 2 years in a row. So went out into the market. I thought they were prudent in their spending. They targeted some areas. Last year it was penalty kill, and penalty kill came from the depths of despair to the league average. Can it grow again? There's room for improvement, certainly. But this time they knew that they needed wingers and scoring help, and they went out and addressed that area too. I think they've done a nice job of reallocating money from areas where they have a surplus to be able to target some areas of need for this hockey club. But also their hands are a little bit tied by their own doing with the OEL buyout, and we'll see how that impacts things. But there's been more good than not by a long shot here with this management group, and it was fun to be part of those 2 rounds of the playoffs, and let's see if there are 2 and maybe more next spring.
Are you confident, Jeff, that 2 of the 3 defensemen at the bottom of the top 7 can play on an every night basis? The Desharnais, Forbort, Juleson, 2 of those 3 will be playing on any given night as it stands right now. How does that hit you?
Yeah, I'm really curious to see what they do with their defensive depth chart. I think we all think that they're going to start the season with Hughes and Hronek again and try and juice that top pairing. But after that, those guys can play 25. Some nights they can play 30, but simple math tells you there's still 30 other minutes that have to be allocated. And I think Carson Soucy, when he was healthy, showed that he can certainly help this hockey club and do the things that you would expect from him. I wrote about Tyler Myers this week at Canucks Army as well, because he got the 3-year extension. He's going to be 35 in February, and father time comes for everybody at some point. And I'm not saying that it's going to happen for Tyler Myers in the first year of this 3-year deal, but we all know his penchant for penalties. Took the 3rd most penalties among any defenseman in the National Hockey League last year. If the foot speed, and right now, I mean, he skates beautifully for a big guy, but if the feet go at any point, you would expect that would probably mean more penalties. That puts the Canucks in a tough spot, obviously. And as much as Soucy and Myers got the shutdown assignment against a guy like Connor McDavid in the playoffs, the underlying numbers were brutal. Like, they got absolutely caved. Now, the puck stayed out of their net, but they spent so many shifts running around in their own zone, keeping the Oilers to the perimeter, but 2-minute shifts stacked on 2-minute shifts where all they could do was ultimately get the puck, flip it high to center ice, and get off the ice. Eventually that's going to come back to bite you. So Myers is going to be a fascinating study. We know that he's a guy that's in the spotlight in this market, has been for the bunch of years that he was here under the first contract. It's a 3-year extension. So I've got some concerns a little higher. I mean, the roundabout way of getting to your question, Blake, concerns a little bit higher. And then, I think Derek Forbort, he is what he is. He's just a big body that eats pucks, and I think can do what he does effectively here. But then there are questions, and they seem to think that there is more to give from Vincent Desharnais. So is it as simple as Forbort and Desharnais are your 3rd pair, or are we going to see some sort of experiment here where a guy like Desharnais plays higher in the lineup? And if that's what the Canucks are thinking, then I would just caution, this is a guy that was a healthy scratch for the Oilers at the highest of leverage games in the Stanley Cup final. They brought him right out of their lineup. So to think that he couldn't play for the Oilers, but now he's maybe going to be Quinn Hughes' partner because they see upside, maybe it's there. Like, I'll trust the instincts of the coaching staff, and that's what training camp and preseason is for, I suppose. But no, I've got the concerns that I think a lot of people have about a little bit lower in the depth chart, and that's why I thought even that little bit of money that they spent on Daniel Sprong, I guess I just thought it was earmarked to try to find a way to upgrade the defense core at some point here moving forward.
So you're not a believer that, Desharnais has only played 140 some NHL games. Big guys are late bloomers, and there is more untapped potential in this guy, even at age 28.
I need to see it. And I just go on the way that the coaching staff in Edmonton utilized him in the playoffs. And I understand. I mean, the size is undeniable. And they think that, he's that ball of clay that they can mold into something. And look, they brought the best out in Tyler Myers last year. Give this coaching staff, the systems and the structure some credit. So if it can happen, Adam Foote is probably the guy, the big man whisperer, if you will, because it worked with Myers, and maybe they can do the same with Vincent Desharnais. I just am pointing out the pitfalls if they're going to go into the season thinking that, hey, we're going to shock the world, and Vinny Desharnais is going to be the caddy for Quinn Hughes. I'm not convinced that that is the blueprint to success for the Vancouver Canucks.
Okay, final question from me here, Jeff. Are you done with hockey? Can I ask another poll question?
Sure, yeah.
Do you want to see Vancouver host another Olympics, Jeff? And the poll is so worded that we have excluded Whistler. No offense, Whistler, but because this guy wanted to keep it open,
we didn't say
there
winner.
Be an appetite for the summer games. But do you want to see Vancouver host the Olympics again, whether it's winter or summer?
I guess I've always come from the camp that I thought 2010 was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. But as we see now, the IOC going back to a place like Salt Lake City, and I get the cost of the games and places that have infrastructure, it only makes sense to consider some of those previous host sites. So on that front, it was an incredible 2 weeks. It was. I look back fondly. I did shows with you guys, remembering at Robson Square, and we weren't rights holders, so I wasn't on the front line, but in that international broadcast center at Robson Square, I remember doing a show where Scott Moyer and Tessa Virtue, the day after they won their Olympic gold at the Coliseum, brought their medals down and did a radio row, and it was incredible. Just that kind of experience. So I loved being in the middle of it. Those sunny 2 weeks in February, the weather was incredible. I know they had to truck some snow into Cyprus, but we'll leave that aside. So, I mean, selfishly, I think by the time it would get back to Vancouver, we'll probably all be out of the business. So at that point, you can put your feet up and just be a spectator, right? Like, it's not going to happen anytime. Well, it's not going to happen in the next 10 years. I think they're all spoken for. So, selfishly, I would say, sure, bring it on, understanding the unbearable costs for many that come along with being a host site for the Olympics.
Just going to say he's got 4 children. He needs to eke 25 more years out of this business.
He's just getting started, just getting warmed up.
He's mid-career.
Absolutely.
Buddy, you're in for me next week. And this time I'm positive of that. I've checked the schedule. So thank you for that. Appreciate this. Have a good weekend, Jeff. And the audience will hear from you next week.
All right. You enjoy a little downtime, Blake. We'll fire it up on Monday.
In a season like this, you never want to miss a single second of what's happening on the ice, and you want to be around your fellow fans, right? Well, Greta Bar YVR at 50 West Cordova, the perfect spot to do so. Hey, if you've got tickets, a great place to pre and post. They've got drink specials every single day. And if you don't have tickets, well, stick around and soak up the atmosphere with all your fellow fans, play all the great video games and air hockey, great air hockey setup as well at Greta Bar YVR. We'll see you there, 50 West Cordova.
Happy hour on Sekeres and Price. Today's beer of the day, Yellow Dog's Chase My Tail Pale Ale.
Vancouver's Ben Steiner is covering the Olympics for the CBC. He joined us on the eve of the games, or just after the first weekend of the games, and he joins us here as the games in Paris are coming to a close. How you doing? How's the experience been?
A little bit tired. It's certainly caught up to me the last couple of days, but still feeling good. It's a lot of fun to cover the Olympics.
Absolutely. Overall, and look, Ben, as we sit here and talk, there may well be some more medals added in short order here. It's a busy schedule for the Canadians. But as we sit here and talk, 1 medal off the Tokyo total, how do you think at large Team Canada has done?
It's been surprising. It's been historic. I think, some of the medals that we kind of expected, the men's basketball, women's soccer, Damian Warner in the decathlon, those didn't come to fruition. But did we expect trampoline medals for the first time in 12 years? Not really. Did we expect, more out of Andre DeGrasse? For sure. I think a lot of people did. Did we expect there overall, there were a lot of medals that we expected that we didn't get. And there were a lot of medals that, we didn't expect that Canada ended up getting. And so the overall medal total is great, but it almost makes you think of what if those favorites actually landed on the podium? Where could Canada be then? Because, then we'd be well through the 23 and the 24 at a non-boycotted games. And, we could be talking about 30 medals for Canada.
The darn round bouncy balls have let us down. Bouncy balls.
You're talking handball here, right? We didn't qualify.
We didn't qualify for that. And the hammer throw is officially a ball, but it's not a bouncy ball. I'm going to stipulate the bouncy balls let us down. All due respect to Felix Auger-Aliassime, I guess that's a round bouncy ball too. But that's a racket. Soccer and basketball, most notably. The women's 3-on-3 was right there. They were their own worst enemy. Women's soccer, valiant run through group play, the better team, and I think in their loss, but they lost. And then, of course, most notably the men's basketball team. Perhaps it was a medal. It was a medal in my mind. I just questioned which color it was going to be. I could have foreseen a semifinal loss and then a game in the bronze medal match. I could have seen them going down that route. They didn't even do that, Ben.
Yeah, it's an embarrassing loss, to put it bluntly, for the men's basketball team. These players took time out of their summers. They took time away from their families, their vacations, whatever they wanted to do during their NBA offseason to commit to Canada. It was the first time in a generation that they committed to Canada to go win a medal at the Olympics. And they don't even get to play a medal game. They come up short in a quarterfinal. Like, that is, Torino 2006 men's hockey levels of disappointment. And it's concerning as well, because will these players want to do that again in 4 years' time when it comes to LA? And I think in LA, they even have a better chance because they're not going to be scared of that crowd, which is going to be an NBA crowd in LA.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
Less travel in LA, so I think they have that going in their favor.
Well, but what I would worry about is that the players don't see value in this. Particularly as we get 4 years forward, the NBA salaries are only going to get bigger. The entourages are only going to get bigger. The demands of the NBA club are only going to get bigger. What's your sense, Ben? Do you think this was one and done in terms of being able to centralize the best NBA talent, or do you think something has been rooted here in the program with Coach Fernandez, with Rowan Barrett, in terms of getting these guys to understand the value, see the value, and want to put the Maple Leaf on every 4 years or every 2 years in the case of World Cups?
I really hope this isn't the last we've seen of it, because it was such a brief moment. If it was, LA is a different story because, as Blake said, it's LA, it's close. It's basically just, an NBA travel for them. And it's going to be with NBA fans. They're not going to be concerned about, the rabid European fans that they certainly look shaken up by against France. But, when you're looking at 2032 in Brisbane, is that going to be attractive to travel across the world and compete for medal? Probably not. And so it's going to be, an Olympics by Olympics type thing. And that's sort of the concerning thing when it comes to this missed opportunity for Canada basketball at these games, because it was such an opportunity to have that Canada-USA final that everybody wanted. The U.S. held up their end of the bargain, albeit barely yesterday, but they managed to get through. And, it was going to be a game that could have rivaled the likes of the gold medal game in 2010, honestly. And we're not seeing that. But on your point of whether the players see value from it, they don't really consider themselves Olympians in the same way. Like, none of them are getting Olympic rings tattoos as the divers are.
Right.
Yeah. This is just a tournament they go to, right?
Did they stay in the village, Ben?
I don't think so.
I wasn't able to confirm that. I don't believe so. I know the U.S. team doesn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are we? How do you think? Sorry,
I was going to say, are we a track and field country, Ben?
He's beating this drum today, Steiner.
Like, I'm just wondering, what are the big overarching lessons that we used to be a rowing country. We're not a rowing country anymore, apparently.
Just the one medal in row.
We're kind of a swimming country. Summer is the figurehead, obviously, but we're kind of a swimming country. Year after year, we produce a swimmer, Penny Alexiak, into Summer McIntosh. But are we a track and field country now, all of a sudden? Because there's a lot of athletics that we're looking pretty good at.
Have we not been a track and field country? Last I checked, 1996 was a pretty good track and field event for Canada, and of course, that was before my
1996.
time.
How old are you, Ben? How old are you? Come on, give it to me. How old are you?
-4, but I did spend some time with Donovan Bailey this week. So spent some time with Donovan Bailey around the CBC offices this week, and he's still living in the glory of winning that medal. And of course, Bruni Surin is the chef de mission for this Team Canada. That it's been a while that Team Canada's been good at track and field. We're seeing the field side of it now with Alicia Newman, Sarah Mitten today, the hammer throwers, Ethan Katzberg and Cameron Rogers. A little bit less on the track now. We'll probably see from Marco Rope, and then of course the chaotic disappointment if you didn't see the 5,000 meter and the 10,000 meter from Mohamed. But yeah, it's a track and field country. You're right on that, but it's also a swimming country because you can go down the list of Canadian swimmers. It's not just McIntosh and Alexiak, but Leando and Caroon got men's medals this time around. Maggie McNeil got a few medals. Kylie Mass has 6 medals to her name. That it is, Canada's a swimming and track and field country, and debatably more of a Summer Olympics country now than a Winter Olympics country too.
Yeah.
Ooh,
well, hey, that's saying something. So we're 14 years on from Own the Podium and Road to Excellence, and of course, the Olympics, particularly the Summer Olympics, it only gets bigger, right? So there's more medals at stake. So contextualize it for us. How are we doing with Own the Podium, Road to Excellence? On the summer side of things, even if we exceed 24 medals won in Tokyo, Ben, which is a very good bet at this stage, does the bar have to be higher? Like, should we have been looking at obliterating 24 medals given the additional events, and given that we're now, a decade and a half into these programs where we are focused on winning?
Yeah, to put the Own the Podium program simply to people who might not know it, it's if there's a athlete that can contend for a medal, they get more funding than the athlete that is 33 and might not do another cycle, even though both of them are competing at a high level, and the 33-year-old might actually be better. That creates its own problems because we see the issues around safe sport in Canada, around sporting development in Canada, because everything has been focused on winning, and then you hamper sport development, and you're not getting those athletes up. Summer McIntosh left Canada to become the swimmer she is today. She trains in Sarasota, Florida, because the system wasn't there in Canada to elevate her to the level she wanted to be at. And so when you look at what Own the Podium does, it's great in some aspects that it's able to, elevate those high performance programs, but with the amount of issues at the grassroots level, at the development level, at just keeping, especially girls in sport, that has been a struggle. And that's where Canada starts to, have to take a look in the mirror and reassess what we're doing sporting development wise, because that's the reason we're not, obliterating these medal counts. We're winning medals, but we're not bringing up athletes in the same way.
I was going to ask you, look, Léon Marchand, the French swimmer, has 5 medals, 4 gold. Simone Biles has 3 golds in these Olympics. How close is Summer McIntosh to being sort of the star of the games, the athlete of the games? Is she on the podium in that regard? Is she amongst the top handful of athletes at these games that will be remembered?
I wish that last relay did well, because she would have really had a case if that last relay did well.
I think she's just off the podium, that classic Canadian top 5 finish at the Olympics. So just off the podium in terms of that, the France men's basketball team has to be on that now, considering what they've done to be able to get to the final and unify that country. Léon Marchand, you look at, what some of the French athletes have been able to do in track and field as well. Like, they're not a slouch. This is their Vancouver 2010. We remember the excitement we had about, Canada having that breakout Olympics in Vancouver 2010. And it seemed like, the gold medals were flowing. It was record gold. It was record medals. First gold on Canadian soil. Like, everything was happening. And that is this Olympics for France. So these Olympics, they're Léon Marchand's Olympics. They're the French men's rugby team Olympics. They're everything France. And it's been the perfect home Olympics for their athletes.
Which is what you do, right? You ramp up when you're hosting the games, and it's tougher in the summer games because there's so many juggernaut countries. But hey, we're 11th in total medals right now. That seems about we are not a heavily populated country. For us to be 11th in total medals, doesn't it seem about right, guys? 10th, 11th, especially for a summer games. Doesn't that seem right?
It seems about right, to be honest. Like there are smaller countries that have more success. Like the Netherlands is always going to have success. Jamaica's going to have success when it comes to the athletics events. But even Canada's better than Jamaica at a lot of athletics events, other than some of the sprinting, right? So you can start to look at it in that, and then you can start to look at it in the way that the U.S. do to make sure they're always atop the podium. I know at points this games they didn't have the most gold, so suddenly the American network started counting total medals, which they never do before. And the Australians have started counting it by medals per capita outside of countries that have like more than 1 million people. So you discount like St. Lucia and stuff like that. So any way to put yourself atop, I'm sure we can find some way to put Canada atop the medal standings. But in reality, 11th most medals won, and they might crack the top 10 by the end of it. That's a pretty successful games for a Canadian Summer Olympics team.
Yeah, I can see that view. I think there's also a good case to be made that the Netherlands, Germany, Italy, South Korea, and Japan should be in our orbit.
Japan's population is 125 million.
I understand
Three
that. I understand that.
times
No, but
us.
Blake, if we're going by population, where's India? Last I checked, it was 3 medals and 1 billion people. So
but they don't have the
think
infrastructure.
we could be vying for and exceeding the medal counts of those countries. Ben, is that too much to ask? Is that too high a bar?
When you look at the sporting system in Canada, it's so split up because, everybody plays hockey growing up. Those registration numbers are dropping as well. But, everybody plays a massive wide range of sports that we're splitting up between summer and winter. And you look at, the Netherlands, they're great at speed skating, but where are they in curling? Where are they in hockey? Canada is contending in those events most of the time. Outside of some recent Olympics, that Canada often has a contender across the board in the events that you look at the Olympics, or at least an athlete. And that's, not the case for a lot of countries. So Canada and the US in particular, just because of the way that, sport is approached here, that it's not that one sport that everybody's completely fixated on or always participating in. That's, why Canada is the way it is and maybe isn't the best in a lot of sports.
Australia and the Netherlands are the only two countries that don't have significant, like even Italy has twice our population.
Well, okay, but
that matters. The
Germany's got more people than us too, but
3 times.
Okay, let me just play this game though. 3-on-3 basketball semi, late lead, blow it. Germany winds up getting a medal. We don't. Women's soccer, quarterfinals. They beat us in penalties. They did get the bronze, if I'm not mistaken, women's soccer, right? And we don't. So, those sorts of matches where you can flip the medal,
sure,
right? You get it. And one of these other countries that's in your neck of the woods, in your neighborhood, doesn't. Those are the sorts of games, events whereby you can move up the medal table and improve your lot in life.
Absolutely. And hey, like we're obliterating Spain and Sweden and other countries that I'm sure are thinking, hey, we should probably be better than we are. But yeah, can you reel in a Germany and Italy? Yeah, probably you can. They're not too far away.
What do you think, Ben? Can these countries be reeled in? The one, Japan, Korea, Italy, Germany, Netherlands, some of these countries that are above us right now on the medal table. Do you think you can reel them in by LA?
I would think so. Canada is one of the most common top 5 finishes. Italy is the most common 4th place finish at these Olympics. That Canada's there. You look at an athlete like Kaylee McKay, and I spoke to her a couple days ago now, but she's gone to the Olympics twice now. She's competed in 4 events, and she's finished 4th twice. The other time was 5th. So she's right there. It's the Chinese divers and the North Korean diver that continuously beat her. And there's nothing she can do about it. She's learned to live with that. She's learned to be happy with getting to the games and being in that conversation, that the margins are so close. And at one point you're seeing a medal go up on the wall and the other point you're not, right? So it can be the smallest margins that sort of define these conversations. And it's about flipping that margin. And those athletes don't come out of nowhere. Those athletes are most of the time already there. And they're the ones that finished 4th. They're the Alicia Newmans of the world that managed to get over that mark this time.
Yeah, we need more Alicia Newmans able to break through, get to a podium, not to mention some of the surprise medals that you've noted, Ben, be it the trampoline, the fencing, in events that may not be the most high profile.
Hey, we get softball
count
back.
Just the same.
We get baseball back. We get flag football.
Yep.
I mean, these are some tap-ins for
absolutely.
us.
There
LA,
should be some medals that are a little bit more prone because of the sports schedule in Los Angeles being more North American centric. I got 2 more questions for you, Mr. Steiner. Tell us about Vancouver's Philip Kim, aka B-Boy Phil Wizard, and the breakdancing that goes Sunday, the final day of the games, which should absolutely be a gold for Canada, right?
It should be, but as long as you don't discount it and call it, something like bouncy castles. But it's certainly going to be an important one for Canada in terms of the medal count. And Matt, I see your face right now, but Philip Kim, he's a tremendous athlete. When you look at what he's been able to do at the World Championships, he's won a World Championship, won a Pan Am Games. I had the pleasure of being able to watch him at the Red Bull Cypher event in Toronto a few months ago. And he's been, exceptional. He's one of Canada's top athletes. In the rain at the opening ceremony, he was, spinning on his head, just having the time of his life. He's been there for 2 weeks, taking it all in, and it's certainly a favorite for a gold medal here.
Does he have good cardboard? Because when I was a kid, he had a good fridge box or something like that. Like that was pretty big.
Is it standardized?
Yeah. Like what kind of cardboard are they using here for the breakdancing? Do you have any idea what I'm talking about?
Well, I've got a decent idea. So he actually first got into the sport by seeing dancers outside the Vancouver Art Gallery. And that's where he decided that he wanted to, get into breaking and then probably on cardboard. You can even go down the annals of, Canadian soccer, I've covered too many sports, Canadian breaking history, because Dwayne De Rosario used to be a breaker, a b-boy, and he would dance on Toronto Transit Company train platforms. That the sport's been in Canada for a long time. It's been competed in different ways, different competition formats, and now it gets the bright lights of the Olympics. So from the Vancouver Art Gallery to the bright lights of the Olympic Games, where they've still got people sitting cypher side, it's called, surrounding the circle. We saw it today in the women's event, that it's going to be a pretty cool event for Phil Kim.
Is D-Row doing the color for CBC on this?
I'm surprised they didn't call
I thought he might be.
Grade 4 talent show.
This guy right there. You should have seen.
You should see
also, he called it a sport, and I don't know. I had a reflexive action to that was, but with regards to
I can't wait for river dance,
trampoline, gymnastics trampoline. You've been talking to Larson there at the CBC building, Steiner? Huh? She's been filling your head.
She's been bad-mouthing Sekeres? I hope so.
I mean, we're 12 years on. I would hope that Karen has come to peace with this. And hey, we have him on another time. Now he's getting lippy with me.
Yeah, exactly.
He wasn't lippy in his first hit. Last question, Ben. It's our poll. And you're a Vancouver guy. Do you want to see our city host the Olympics again? And we did not specify winter, my friend. So interpret that question broadly.
Yeah, I saw that on your Twitter poll. There's no way Vancouver could host a Summer Olympics. It is too big to even consider hosting the Summer Olympics, unless you somehow did it with Calgary and rebuilt some of the facilities in Calgary, or you did a Canada-wide Summer Olympics. Like even Toronto is admittedly too small to host a Summer Olympics. And the Winter Olympics I could see, and they tried. There was an effort from the Indigenous communities. There was an effort from the Canadian Olympic Committee. I was one of a few reporters at the Games Plan event a couple of years ago at Whistler, where they outlined exactly what the Olympics would look like if Vancouver were to get the Games in 2030. And it was going to be cool that we were going to see, big air snowboarding at Hastings Racecourse with the mountains in the background. Like, it would have been tremendous. And there was some certain hope for that. But, a lot of people see the Olympics as still what they were in 2010, as a massive cost, a massive liability, in the same way that the World Cup is in terms of coming to Vancouver. But when you look at what Paris has been able to do and what LA is going to be able to do, sure, they have more of the facilities, but it's been a modern approach to the games that isn't costing the same money that it did, in 2010 and in the lead up, that Canada, Vancouver could host an Olympics in a much better way. And that plan was there. The blueprint is there of how they were going to do it for the 2030 games. But it just, the decision makers didn't like the that plan and saw it a little bit more in the Vancouver 2010.
I think an Indigenous back games is ingenious, though. If they can get it together again to make a more sound pitch, I think it's
yeah.
I don't think the IOC would turn a blind eye to that.
Well, and also, Blake, you'll remember on the 10-year anniversary, if I'm not mistaken, we had John Furlong in studio, and he talked about, and boy, in 4 years, it's only gotten more pronounced, housing shortage, right? And you build an Olympic Village, and then you turn it over to being part of the solution for
rental housing
shortage here in Vancouver. Well, it's Milano Cortina in 2026. It's the French Alps in 2030. It's Salt Lake City in 2034. 2038, you'll be a grizzled, cynical reporter, Ben Steiner. And I look forward to having you on Blake Price's show at that point, because we talked about this with Jeff. He's got to stay in the game.
I'll be there.
He's got 4 children. I'll be retired, but I'll happily join in to the fun. Talk to you then, my friend. Thank you.
And talk to you in 2038.
Hey, everybody. If you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres and Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well.